My name is Jennifer, and I've spent most of my life feeling alone. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was just 5, leaving me to be raised by my grandmother. She was my everything, my anchor, my guide, my only family. When she passed away shortly before my wedding, I thought I had found a new family in Mark, my then fiancé. Now, 2 years into our marriage, we live in a lovely two-story townhouse I rented before we tied the knot. It's in a perfect location, and after we got married, it seemed only logical to stay there. Mark moved in his things, and I genuinely believe we had the perfect setup. I worked from home as an assistant editor-in-chief at a major publishing house, which allowed me to juggle both my career and our home life seamlessly. You know what's great about this house? Mark would often say, sprawled on our couch after dinner. It's big enough for family visits. My folks would love it here. I'd smile nervously, trying to hide my discomfort. The thought of house guests made me uneasy, but I never expressed this to Mark. Everything changed the day his sister Sarah showed up unannounced with her 2 elementary school-aged kids, Tommy and Lisa. I still remember opening the door to find them standing there, luggage in hand. "Surprise," Sarah exclaimed, pushing past me into the house. "The kids need some quality time with their uncle. You know, a male influence and all that." I stood frozen as Tommy and Lisa raced into our pristine living room, leaving muddy footprints everywhere. Mark appeared behind me, beaming with joy. "Jen, isn't this great? The kids can stay in the guest room, and Sarah can take the office." "The office?" I stammered. "But that's where I work." "You can work anywhere, honey," he replied, already hauling their bags upstairs. "It's just for the school holidays." That first night, I lay awake, listening to the chaos downstairs. Sarah's kids were fighting over the TV remote, while Sarah complained about the dinner I had made. Little did I know that this moment would trigger a series of events that would completely unravel my marriage. The following weeks were absolute hell. Sarah's kids were out of control. I had never witnessed such behavior before, despite editing plenty of young adult books about troubled teens. "Hey, stupid lady," Tommy would yell at me from across the breakfast table, his hands covered in what I hoped was just mud. "I want pancakes." "Tommy, please wash your hands first, and my name is Jennifer, or Aunt Jen." I tried to reason with him, but Lisa would chime in, deliberately spilling her orange juice on the floor. "Mom says we don't have to listen to you because you're not really family." I glanced at Sarah, hoping she would correct them, but she simply sat there scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to say things like, "Kids will be kids," or, "They're just expressing themselves." One particularly trying morning, while I was struggling to meet a crucial deadline for work, Sarah barged into my makeshift workspace in the living room. "The kids need lunch," she announced as if I were her personal chef. "Something organic and sugar-free, maybe some hand-pressed juice and gluten-free sandwiches." "Sarah, I have a really important deadline," I began, but she cut me off, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, you just sit at home all day typing. That's not real work, unlike being a mother." The days blurred into an endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and trying to salvage my work responsibilities. The kids would trash their rooms daily, wipe their dirty hands on the walls, and throw food during meals. The worst part was that Mark seemed completely oblivious to it all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the school holidays ended. On the morning Sarah and the kids left, I took Mark aside for a serious conversation. "Mark, we need to talk about what just happened," I said, still exhausted from the ordeal. "What do you mean? It was great having them here," he replied, genuinely puzzled. "No, it wasn't. Your sister's kids were completely disrespectful. She didn't lift a finger to help, and I couldn't get any work done. Please don't invite anyone else without discussing it with me first." Mark looked taken aback but nodded. "Okay, honey, I promise I'll talk to you first next time." I spent the next few weeks trying to restore our home and my mental health. The walls needed repainting, the furniture required deep cleaning, and my work deadlines had piled up dangerously high. During this time, I also remembered something important about our lease agreement. "Mark," I said one evening, "I should mention that our landlord is really strict about guests. The agreement has specific clauses about it." He waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Actually, why don't we just put the lease in my name? That way, you won't have to stress about it anymore." We transferred the lease to his name the next day, though I continued to pay the rent from my account as usual. 6 months passed, and life had finally returned to normal, or so I thought. until I found myself catching up on work one Tuesday morning. When I heard Mark's enthusiastic voice from the kitchen, my heart sank. Of course you can stay with us, Mom. We have plenty of room. You and Dad can take the master bedroom, and we'll move downstairs to the guest room. I rushed to the kitchen just in time to hear his mother mentioning something about sewage repairs and water being cut off at their house. Mark, I whispered urgently, tugging at his sleeve. Can we talk about this first? He covered the phone with his hand and replied, Mom and Dad need a place to stay while their plumbing gets fixed. What's there to discuss? That evening, we had our first real fight in months. You promised me, Mark. You promised we'd talk about these things together. I felt frustration bubbling over. What do you want me to do, Jen? He snapped. They're my parents. I can't leave them without running water. Stop being so selfish. The next morning, my in-laws arrived, bringing with them an alarming amount of luggage, enough for what felt like an apocalypse. Within hours, my mother-in-law, Linda, had rearranged my kitchen cabinets, criticized my choice of cleaning products, and commented on the layer of dust on the windowsills. Jennifer, dear, she called from the living room as she directed her husband, Bob, about furniture placement. When you're done with whatever it is you do on that computer, we need dinner. Something substantial, not those silly salads you make. I gritted my teeth. Linda, I'm actually working right now. I have a deadline. Working, she laughed. Sitting at home all day typing isn't real work. Now I'll have dinner. Days blurred together as I tried to write emails while Linda hovered over my shoulder, critiquing my posture. I'd be editing manuscripts while she dictated how to do laundry properly. Apparently, I had been folding sheets wrong my entire adult life. Mark, I pleaded one evening, feeling overwhelmed. I need help. I can't keep up with everything. You're right, he said, and for a moment, relief washed over me. I should take some time off. I smiled, grateful, until he added, Dad and I are thinking about a fishing trip. Get some real father-son bonding time. A fishing trip. I couldn't believe my ears. That's not what I meant. But he was already packing his gear, excitement radiating from him like a child on Christmas morning. The next morning, he and Bob left for their fishing adventure, leaving me alone with Linda. Well, she said, hands on her hips as the door closed behind them, since you're not busy with that little computer job of yours, we can finally get this house properly organized. I glanced at my laptop where 3 urgent emails from my boss awaited replies, then at Linda's determined face. In that moment, I realized something fundamental had shifted in my marriage, and not for the better. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, only a day after Mark and his father left, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sarah standing there with Tommy and Lisa, surrounded by even more luggage than before. Surprise, she exclaimed, pushing past me with the kids in tow. They'd been crying for their grandparents. We couldn't stay away. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing to process what was happening. Linda appeared behind me, squealing with delight. My babies? She hugged the children tightly. Sarah, darling, you're just in time. Jennifer was about to start dinner. I wasn't about to start dinner. I was about to join a critical video call with my publishing team, but nobody seemed to care about that. Actually, I have an important work meeting. Always with the excuses, Sarah rolled her eyes. Mom told me you'd just sit at that computer all day pretending to work. The next few days were pure torture. While Mark and Bob enjoyed their fishing trip, I was trapped in a chaotic house. The kids ran wild, leaving destruction in their wake, while Sarah spent her days video calling friends, complaining about my cooking. Linda criticized everything I did, and nobody lifted a finger to help. But they all had opinions about how I wasn't doing enough. When Mark and his father finally returned from their fishing trip 5 days later, I was ready for a serious conversation. I had rehearsed it in my head, firm but fair, explaining how impossible the situation had become. But before I could get a word in, Mark burst through the door, beaming with joy. Isn't this amazing? He spread his arms wide, taking in the chaos of our once peaceful home. The whole family together. We should do this more often. I felt the room spin. More often, I echoed incredulously. Yeah, Dad and I were talking while fishing, and you know what would be great? If we all lived together for a while, like a real family. The children raced past us, tracking mud across the freshly cleaned floor. I just cleaned, I shouted. Sarah called from upstairs, needing fresh towels, while Linda appeared to remind me it was almost dinner time. Mark, I managed to choke out, "Can we talk privately later?" He waved me off, focused on his dad, showing everyone the photos from their trip. That night, I lay awake in our cramped guest room, listening to the chaos above. Our bedroom was now occupied by his parents, creaking with every movement. Sarah's kids were still running around, despite the late hour. The microwave hummed again, and my phone buzzed with another email from my boss. My second missed deadline this week. "We need to talk." My life had become a nightmare, surrounded by strangers who treated me like their personal maid, children who destroyed everything they touched, and a husband who couldn't, or wouldn't, see what was happening. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to get some work done before everyone else stirred. I started barricading myself in the home office, my last sanctuary in this chaos. But when I opened the door, my heart sank. Sarah was sitting at my desk, my laptop open in front of her, while Tommy and Lisa sprawled on the floor, surrounded by construction paper, glue, and what looked like half the garden's worth of dirt. "Oh good, you're up," Sarah said without looking at me. "The kids have a school project due tomorrow. We're using your laptop for research." "That's my work laptop," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I have deadlines." "Don't be so selfish," Sarah cut me off. "This is for their education. You can do your little typing job later." I found Mark in the kitchen, grabbing his briefcase for work. "Mark, they've taken over my office. They're using my laptop. I can't work." "Not now, Jen," he said, rushing past me as he checked his watch. "I'm late for a meeting. Just share the laptop. It's for the kids." Feeling dizzy, I headed to the bathroom, hoping a shower would help me think clearly. But when I opened the bathroom door, I nearly vomited. The toilet was overflowing with mud and dirt. Footprints tracked through the mess on the tile floor, and handprints decorated the walls. "Oh yeah," Lisa piped up behind me. "We needed somewhere to mix the dirt for our project. Tommy said the toilet would be good because it has water already." I stood there, staring at the destruction. Somewhere in the house, I could hear Linda complaining about lunch plans while Sarah yelled at the kids to gather more supplies for their project. The toilet gurgled ominously, and something inside me snapped. Without a word, I set to cleaning the bathroom. Every swipe of the mop and every scrub of the walls felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. When I finished, I went to our bedroom, the guest room now, and looked around at what my life had become. The next morning, I waited until Mark left for work. I listened to his car pull out of the driveway, counted to 60, and then moved with quiet efficiency. I packed a small bag with some clothes, toiletries, and my phone charger. The only thing I really needed was my laptop, which I managed to retrieve from the office while Sarah was in the kitchen complaining about the breakfast I hadn't made. Nobody noticed when I slipped out the front door. Nobody called out to ask where I was going. The hotel I checked into wasn't fancy, but it had three things my house no longer offered: silence, privacy, and peace. For the first time in weeks, I could hear myself think. I took the longest shower of my life, ordered room service, and actually managed to get some work done. I kept expecting my phone to explode with messages. Surely Mark would notice I was gone. Surely he'd be worried. Surely someone would wonder where the person who did all the cooking and cleaning had disappeared to. But as the hours ticked by, my phone remained silent. No missed calls, no frantic texts, no concern at all for where I'd gone or why. After 3 days of silence, I made the decision to go home, not because I missed them, but because I needed answers. As I approached our front door, the sound of music and laughter spilled into the street, hitting me like a punch to the gut. A full-blown party was in progress. Streamers hung from the ceiling, plates of food covered every surface, and a dozen unfamiliar faces filled our living room. No one noticed as I slipped inside. Navigating through the crowd, I spotted Mark dancing with Sarah, both of them laughing carefreely. More relatives I didn't recognize lounged on our furniture, drinking and chatting as if they owned the place. I drifted toward the kitchen, a ghost in my own home, until I overheard a conversation. And the best part, my mother-in-law said to a woman I didn't know, is that we didn't have to spend a dime on hotels or restaurants. No repairs needed at our house at all. We just wanted a change of scenery. The woman chuckled. "Clever. And you got a pretty housewife out of the deal, too." "Yes, that Jennifer," Linda's voice dripped with contempt. "Though she's not much of a housewife, always complaining about her work. Can you believe she actually ran away 3 days ago? Not that anyone misses her cooking." Their laughter struck me like a physical blow. It had all been a lie. The broken sewage system, the urgent repairs, fabricated excuses for a free vacation at my expense. Something inside me snapped. I pushed through the crowd until I found Mark, still dancing without a care in the world. "We need to talk," I said, grabbing his arm. He followed me to the hallway, annoyance etched on his face. "Your mother just told everyone there were never any repairs needed at their house," I said, my voice shaking. "They just wanted a free place to stay. Did you know about this?" He shrugged, and in that casual gesture, I felt our entire marriage crumble. So what if I did? Their family, they needed a break. A break? I'm the one who cooked for them, cleaned for them while they insulted me and took over my home. And you knew it was all a lie. "Oh, stop being so dramatic," he shot back. "You don't understand because you're an orphan." The word hit me like a slap. Memories flooded my mind. The car accident that took my parents when I was 5, my grandmother raising me alone, her empty seat at our wedding. "That's right," he continued, his voice cruel. "You're just a lonely loser who doesn't understand what it means to have a real, close-knit family. Maybe if you had one, you wouldn't be so selfish." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I walked to her former bedroom and gathered what remained of my belongings while the party continued around me, oblivious. No one tried to stop me, not even Mark. I barely settled into my hotel room and started apartment hunting online when my phone rang. The landlord's number made my stomach clench. "Jennifer," Mr. Peterson's voice was tight with tension. "I've received numerous complaints from the neighbors about your property." "My former property," I corrected him. "I don't live there anymore. The lease was transferred to Mark Thompson, my husband. Remember?" There was a heavy pause. "Yes, well, the neighbors are reporting loud parties, excessive noise at all hours, children running wild in the common areas, and multiple unauthorized residents." "That sounds terrible," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "But it's not my responsibility anymore." Mr. Peterson sighed deeply. "I want you to know that I'll be forced to take the harshest measures allowed under the lease agreement. I'm only calling you as a courtesy because you were such a good tenant for so long." "I appreciate the heads up," I replied, "but you'll need to discuss this with Mark." After hanging up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't bother warning Mark about the call. Let him deal with the consequences of his choices. For once, I found a lovely one-bedroom apartment in a quiet building across town. The landlady was a retired teacher who lived downstairs and appreciated that I worked from home. "It's good to have someone around during the day," she said. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without being awakened by midnight snacks or early morning chaos. 2 weeks into my peaceful life, Mark called. "Jen, we're in serious trouble," he blurted before I could speak. "Peterson showed up today with a stack of papers. He's demanding double rent for the month plus some ridiculous fine." I continued typing my email, letting him ramble. "Did you know it was against the lease to have overnight guests or parties? Why didn't you tell me?" "I had to tell you," I replied calmly. "Multiple times. You didn't want to listen." "Well, I didn't read the whole thing when we transferred it," he admitted. "Look, can you talk to Peterson? He liked you, maybe you can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "That you moved your entire extended family into a rental property without permission. That you've been hosting parties and disturbing the neighbors. That you ignored every warning I gave you about the lease agreement. The neighbors called the police last night," he continued desperately. "Mom and Dad got fined for noise violations. Sarah's kids were running through the building at midnight, and someone complained. We need your help, Jen. You know how to handle these things." I thought about all the times I had cleaned up their messes, literal and figurative. "No," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. You have a whole big, close-knit family there to help you. Remember the real family you said I wouldn't understand because I'm just a lonely orphan. Goodbye, Mark." I hung up mid-plea, turned my phone off, and went back to work. For the first time in months, I smiled. Sometimes karma doesn't need any help at all. The day after Mark's desperate call about the fines, my phone rang again. His name flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer, but something urged me to hear what he had to say. "They're gone," he said without preamble. "Mom, Dad, Sarah, the kids, they all left. Come home, Jen. We can go back to how things were." I almost laughed at the suggestion. Go back, as if the past months could be erased like crayon marks from a wall. "There's no going back, Mark. Please." His voice cracked. "Peterson's asking for so much money. Maybe we could split the costs, half the fine and the double rent." I can't afford it on my own. This time, I did laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. Oh, now you want to split things fairly? Where was this concern for fairness when I was cooking and cleaning for your entire family? When they took over my office, my home, my life? But what about your real, close-knit family? He interrupted. Surely they'll help you pay. After all, I'm just a lonely orphan who doesn't understand family values, remember? A week later, I heard through our mutual friend Amy that Peterson had evicted Mark. She told me he'd shown up at his parents' doorstep with his bags only to be turned away. The irony was almost poetic. Mark's final call came while I was finishing dinner in my peaceful new apartment. My divorce papers lay on the coffee table, filed that morning. Please, Jen, he begged. I've lost everything. The house, my family. I made a mistake. We could start over. I've learned my lesson. I looked around my small but tranquil apartment. My laptop sat on my desk where I'd left it. My coffee mug was exactly where I'd placed it. No crayon on the walls, no mud on the floors, no chaos in the kitchen. You're right about one thing, Mark, I said quietly. You did lose everything, but you lost it yourself, one choice at a time. Every time you chose your family over our marriage, every time you dismissed my feelings, every time you watched them disrespect me and said nothing. I can change, he pleaded. I've already filed for divorce. I cut him off. No, this isn't up for discussion. You showed me exactly who you are and what I mean to you. Consider it a gift. Now I'll never waste another moment wondering. I hung up and blocked his number. Outside my window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. On my desk, a fresh manuscript waited for my attention. My phone remained blissfully silent. Sometimes I think about what my grandmother would say if she could see me now. She always told me that family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. She was right, of course, she usually was. I might be an orphan, as Mark so cruelly pointed out, but I finally understood something important. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Sometimes, the family you're born with or marry into isn't the family you deserve. Sometimes, you have to save yourself. And that's exactly what I did.